All right, welcome to another deep dive with us. This time we're stepping into a world that's, well, a little surreal, to say the least.
It's Salvador Dali, of course, and we've got a pretty good spread laid out in front of us, a YouTube documentary transcript, his whole Wikipedia page. Should be a fun ride.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see what we uncover about this guy. A lot of people know him, the melting clocks, the mustache, the whole flamboyant persona.
Exactly, and the documentary really doesn't hold back right from the start. They actually call him, get this, the first acid trip for everybody, even if you weren't doing acid.
Okay, wow. Right out the gate. So what do you think they're getting at with that? What does that tell us about Dali's impact, even before we really dive into his life and everything?
I think more than anything, it really highlights just how much his art tapped into something primal, something subconscious. Way before psychedelics were really a thing in the mainstream. Dali was already visually capturing that bizarre dream logic, and it resonated, it really did.
So he was making that internal world, the world of dreams and the subconscious, external in a way that people could connect with. And maybe that explains why his work, even if it's strange, is so captivating.
I think so. He managed to bring those surreal, almost unsettling landscapes from the depths of our minds out into the open, making them, in a way, universally accessible.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about Dali himself, the man behind the art. The documentary paints a picture of a guy who was addicted to controversy, someone who would invent something if things got too quiet around him.
Yeah, there was definitely a calculated aspect to his eccentricity. This wasn't just a naturally quirky guy. He seemed to thrive on pushing buttons and provoking reactions.
And the documentary even digs into some pretty disturbing early signs of this. Apparently, he used to slam his head against columns in school to get attention.
Yeah, that's a bit unsettling, right? I mean, it really goes beyond just wanting to be noticed. It speaks to a deeper need for validation, almost a desperation to make people react to him in some way.
So maybe behind all the theatrics, there was a certain insecurity or vulnerability driving that need for attention.
It wouldn't be surprising. It's often those who are most insecure who put up the biggest front, constructing these larger-than-life personas to hide behind.
Okay, now here's where things get even more interesting.
Oh.
The documentary also describes him as a smaller, shyer, nervous person underneath it all, rather on the frightened side even.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it? The flamboyant showman versus the shy, nervous individual. It makes you wonder how much of that outward persona was a deliberate act, a way to shield himself from his own anxieties.
So maybe the fear of being overlooked or insignificant fueled this need to constantly shock and provoke.
It's certainly possible. I mean, it's a pretty common human experience, right? We create these masks to protect ourselves, to project an image that we feel is more acceptable or powerful.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a figure who seems absolutely crucial in Dali's life, Gala. Their meeting in 1929 was apparently a total game changer.
Absolutely. Gala was this fascinating figure in her own right. A Russian immigrant, 10 years older than Dali, already married to the surrealist poet Paul Eluard when they met.
Yeah, not exactly your average love story. And the documentary claims that Dali couldn't do a third of what he achieved if he hadn't got Gala. So what was it about her that had such a profound impact on his life and career?
Well, for one, she was already a known figure in the surrealist circles. She was a muse, inspiring artists. There's this story that if a surrealist produced a particularly good piece, people would joke, he must be having an affair with Gala.
Wow, that's quite a reputation. So she was already this force of nature, shaping the creative landscape around her.
Exactly. And when she met Dali, it seems like she saw something in him, some raw talent that needed to be cultivated and channeled.
Right, the documentary describes her transforming him from a guy who was literally painting on sand, on paper, on cardboard, to this disciplined artist capable of producing the works we know today.
It's almost like she brought a much-needed structure to his boundless imagination. He had the vision, but she helped him refine it and turn it into something tangible, something marketable even.
And beyond just artistic guidance, it seems like she was the real business brain in their partnership. The brains, the money, his stage manager, especially when it came to breaking into the American market.
Absolutely. She understood the power of publicity, of crafting a narrative that would capture the public's attention. She saw the potential for commercial success in America, and she knew how to play the game.
Okay, so she was this savvy businesswoman, but the power dynamic in their relationship sounds pretty complex too. The documentary mentions that she dominated every aspect of his life, despite being physically small.
Right, and there's that whole thing about the Gala Salvador Dali signature. Like she was merging their identities, making it clear who was really in control.
It's described as this secret society of two, with him practically worshiping her, but with her secretly fearing losing control. It's a lot to unpack.
It definitely suggests a relationship built on more than just love and admiration. There was this power struggle, this need for control that seems to have run through their entire partnership.
And the documentary doesn't shy away from Gala's darker side either. Descriptions of her as spiteful, this aggressive even, creating an atmosphere of fear around her.
Yeah, it's a far cry from the romanticized image of the nurturing muse. It paints a picture of a woman who was perhaps as controlling and manipulative as she was supportive and inspiring.
There's even this unsettling quote that she both made Dali and she destroyed Dali.
It's a powerful statement that speaks to the complex and often contradictory nature of their relationship. Was she his savior or his downfall? Or maybe a bit of both.
It's interesting. The documentary also includes this anecdote about Dali giving a taxi driver $100 without even knowing what money really meant. Like he had zero grasp of practical matters.
It really reinforces this idea of him as someone completely detached from the everyday world, lost in his own creative bubble. Gala was the one who grounded him, who dealt with the practicalities of life so he could focus on his art.
Okay, let's step back in time for a minute and look at Dali's early years. He was born in Figueres, Spain, and actually named after his deceased older brother. His father was a strict notary, his mother this doting Catholic who encouraged his art.
It's an interesting mix of influences, right? The strict, rational father versus this artistic, nurturing mother. And that whole thing about him attributing his love of everything that is gilded and excessive to an Arab lineage. Even if it's not true, it shows his tendency to create these elaborate narratives around himself.
It's like he was always crafting his own mythology.
Yeah.
And the loss of his mother in 1921, when he was still quite young, seems to have hit him really hard.
The documentary calls it a devastating blow to his self-confidence. You can imagine how losing that source of support, especially as a young artist, could have fueled his need for validation from the outside world.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to fill that void left by his mother's death. And his time in art school in Madrid is pretty characteristically defiant. He was expelled for refusing to take his final exams.
Apparently, he believed his knowledge was far superior to his teachers. Talk about self-belief, right? Or maybe it was just another way to rebel against authority and grab attention.
Then, in 1926, he moved to Paris and really immersed himself in the Surrealist movement. It's described as this perfect expression of his personality, this exploration of the subconscious and the shocking.
It was a movement that embraced the irrational and the bizarre, which was right up Dali's alley. They even had this obligation to shock their audiences, which he clearly excelled at.
And it's not like he just came out of nowhere with this surrealist style. He was influenced by a whole range of things. Impressionism, Renaissance masters, Cubism, even avant-garde movements like Dada and Futurism.
Yeah, he absorbed everything like a sponge, incorporating all these different elements into his own unique style. He was also deeply interested in Freud and La Trama, those explorations of the subconscious and the dark, dreamlike imagery.
What's interesting is that he was already having success before fully embracing surrealism. His first solo exhibition in Barcelona back in 1925 was a hit, and he had even met Picasso by that point.
So even in those early years, there was something about his work that was captivating people. He was already making waves in the art world, connecting with some major figures.
And then by 1927, his work became distinctly surrealist, with those dreamlike images, the melting clocks, the distorted figures, and those recurring motifs like rotting donkeys and dismembered bodies.
And that's where his famous paranoid critical method comes in, this deliberate attempt to induce a paranoid state of mind to generate artistic ideas. He's basically trying to tack into the irrational, the dream logic, to create these unsettling and thought-provoking images.
So it wasn't just about painting his dreams. It was a deliberate technique, a way to access and harness the power of the subconscious.
Right, he would intentionally misinterpret reality, seeing multiple images within a single form, and then try to capture that delirious perception in his paintings. It was a way to destabilize the viewer's sense of reality, to make them question what they were seeing.
The late 1930s were a tumultuous time in Spain with the Civil War, and Dali's stance during this period was quite controversial, especially among his fellow surrealists.
Yeah, a lot of the surrealists were pretty politically active, aligning themselves with the Republican cause, but Dali remained mostly neutral, which alienated a lot of people.
It seems like he was more interested in the psychological and artistic implications of the conflict than taking a clear political stance.
Right, and that detachment, coupled with his later reconciliation with Franco, really damaged his reputation in some circles. It raises questions about the role of the artist in times of political upheaval.
In 1939, with World War II looming, Dali and Gala made a pretty significant move. They headed to America.
It seemed like they saw America as this land of opportunity, a place where they could really capitalize on Dali's growing fame and Gala's business savvy.
And they weren't afraid to make a splash. They threw these elaborate parties in Hollywood where guests were supposed to represent their bad dreams.
Talk about making an entrance, right? They understood the power of spectacle, of grabbing the public's attention with these over-the-top events.
And it seems like Gala's management in America was absolutely key to his success there. She's credited with turning him into the undisputed king of surrealism, with Hollywood embracing his whole eccentric persona.
She was a master at cultivating his image, at creating this aura of mystique and intrigue around him. And she knew how to leverage his fame to secure lucrative commissions and collaborations.
The documentary really emphasizes her role in turning him into a brand, basically.
Yeah.
And they were quite the glamorous power couple, always impeccably dressed, attending all the right parties.
They were celebrities as much as artists, and they played the game perfectly.
Their American success was also greatly aided by the support of some key patrons, like Reynolds and Eleanor Morse, who collected a huge chunk of his work.
Yeah, they provided not just financial stability, but also this validation of his artistic worth in the American context. Their patronage allowed Gala to really invest in promoting his career, solidifying his legacy.
And Dali didn't just stick to painting in America. He collaborated on all sorts of projects, from Hitchcock's Spellbound to opera set designs, even a Disney cartoon that was deemed too surreal to be released.
It shows his willingness to experiment, to push the boundaries of his art into different mediums, and even the failed Disney project speaks volumes about his artistic integrity. He wasn't willing to compromise his vision, even for a major studio.
Gala's role during their American years was also fascinating. She was fiercely protective of him, both professionally and personally.
She was his gatekeeper, shielding him from anything she perceived as a threat, including other women. It's clear she saw him as her creation, her masterpiece, and she was determined to control his every move.
And their private life in America was, well, as surreal as his paintings, to say the least. They engaged in voyeurism, organized orgies, and Gala openly had affairs with younger men, which Dali seemingly encouraged.
It was a relationship that defied all conventional norms. They were partners in crime, exploring their desires and pushing the boundaries of their unconventional bond.
By the late 1940s, though, it seems like they're both yearning for something different. They returned to Spain, settling in Port Legat, and their lifestyle, at least outwardly, became more conventional.
And maybe they were tired of the constant spotlight, the craziness of their American years. Or maybe Dali felt a need to reconnect with his Spanish roots.
And his artistic style underwent a pretty significant shift as well. He briefly abandoned surrealism for classicism, reconciled with Franco, and even returned to the Catholic Church. He and Gala even remarried in a Catholic ceremony in 1958.
It was a period of ideological and artistic realignment, a turn towards tradition and conservatism that surprised and alienated a lot of his earlier supporters. Whether it was a genuine change of heart or another calculated provocation, it's hard to say.
It seems like their relationship dynamic changed as well during this period. While still appearing close in public, Gala reportedly grew tired of Dali's constant need for attention, wanting a quieter life. They even started living in separate residences, which deeply upset Dali.
It's like their roles reversed. Gala, who had once thrived on the spotlight, wanted to step back, while Dali still craved the attention and validation he'd always sought.
In his 70s, Dali's health began to decline. The early stages of Parkinson's disease started to affect his ability to paint, and the documentary paints a rather bleak picture of Gala's reaction to this.
It suggests that her primary concern was his continued ability to produce art, that he was, in her eyes, her cash cow. It's a sad commentary on the state of their relationship in those later years.
With Gala's attention elsewhere, Dali became vulnerable to exploitation. He even started signing blank canvases, which unscrupulous individuals could then use to create fake Dali works.
It's a heartbreaking image of an aging, ailing artist being taken advantage of. He seemed to have lost control of his own legacy, his artistic integrity compromised.
Gala's death in 1982 at the age of 89 was a devastating blow to Dali, despite the difficulties they had faced in their final years together. He retreated to the castle he'd bought for her in Pubol, surrounding himself with her memory, and fell into a deep depression.
Despite all their complexities and the shifts in their relationship, Gala had been his anchor for over 50 years. Her death left a void that he clearly couldn't fill.
His final years were marked by declining health, increasing isolation, and a sense of profound loss. He died in 1989 at the age of 84 in his hometown of Figures.
It was the end of a truly remarkable life, full of creativity, controversy, and contradictions. He left behind a legacy that continues to fascinate and provoke to this day.
So what are we left with after this deep dive into Dali's world? We see this incredible talent, this drive to shock and provoke, but also this vulnerability, this dependence on Gala, and ultimately this tragic decline in his final years.
He was a master of self-creation, constructing this larger-than-life persona that often overshadowed his art. And Gala was the architect of his success, the force that shaped his destiny, for better or worse.
And their relationship was truly something else, a surreal partnership built on passion, power, and a shared desire to push the boundaries of art and life.
It's a reminder that behind every great artist, there's often a complex and fascinating story. And sometimes, the most shocking and unsettling aspects of their lives are inextricably linked to the art they create.
So as we wrap up, I'm left with this lingering question. Given the deliberate construction of his public image and the immense influence of Gala, can we ever truly know the real Salvador Dali?
It's a question that will probably never have a definitive answer, but maybe that's part of the enduring fascination with Dali. He remains an enigma, a puzzle that we can try to piece together but never fully solve.
And that's part of the beauty of art, right? It challenges us to think, to interpret, to question. So maybe the next time you see a melting clock or a lobster phone, you'll think about the man behind the image and the forces that shaped his extraordinary and often unsettling vision.
Absolutely. And you might even find yourself questioning your own perceptions, wondering what lies beneath the surface of the reality you think you know. After all, isn't that what surrealism is all about?
It certainly gives you something to think about. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.